everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Quiltfolk virtual show and tell. I am your host, Jenni Smith. I'm an author and a quilter in the north of England, and I thought to start off with I'll give you a little sneak peek of the landscape, which is Ilkley Moor, just 2 minutes walk from my house. You can see those lovely dry stone walls that Yorkshire is very famous for, and this is the place where I come most days to daydream about my sewing projects, my next quilts, but also to contemplate all the wonderful conversations that I'm having whilst I'm producing this show that I really hope that you enjoy. For me, it's a huge privilege to get to talk to people and learn a little bit about the processes of their incredible work and to be able to share those with you. It's wonderful to get different insights from makers all across the globe, and this week is no exception. We are talking to Scott in Berlin. We have got Margaret in Philadelphia, Jess in Sydney, Australia, and to start off with, we have Irina in Helsinki in Finland.
I grew up watching my mom. She was a brilliant sewist and knitter, and she did beautiful embroidery. I learned it from her, but as a child, I did not have enough patience, and I did not want to do these things. And if someone would have told me that time, but it would become my life passion, I would have never believed. In Finland, Marimekko is very famous. Every Finnish family has something Marimekko in their house. And I think for most of Finns, it's like an icon of Scandinavian design. I'm very lucky to live here and be able to work with these fabrics. And for me as a quilter, it's a very interesting experience in a way that you cut all those large-scale prints into small pieces, and you basically create a vibrant new patchwork fabric. Until I started quilting it, it did not come to life. But quilting happened 3 years later after the quilt top was completed. And I think it was perfect timing to get it out because, pandemic, it's actually black period in our life. And seeing all these colorful circles, for me, it's like color on black represents hope, and I think it's kind of symbolic, name rainbow on black, because rainbows never fail and they always give hope that everything will be fine. Sometimes in winters when there's not much color around, only black and occasionally white, I sometimes just go to a Marimekko store for a color therapy, because when I look at those fabrics, they bring me joy. I feel my mood lifts. I also call my quilting imperfectly perfect, because as a self-taught quilter on a domestic machine with 2 layers of bearing, it's really hard to manage. But I want to tell everyone and encourage people in the sense that only you see the imperfections, nobody else. Once it's quilted, everyone just sees the beauty of your quilt, and only you know about all those little mistakes. I believe the more you learn, the more you want to learn. And quilting, it's a lifetime journey. You learn with every project something new.
And do you think being a scientist, does that come through in your work, or do you think you're the opposite personality when you're quilting?
I think actually my scientific background helps me a lot in quilting, because quilting, like any other activity, it's a trial and error. So you basically experiment all the time. And not all experiments are successful, but majority are. And even a negative result is a good result. You would not do this again, the same mistake over and over. You learn from it. So I think it's actually helped me really much to not to stop, not to be afraid of failure, and just keep learning. I'm very surprised, for example, how much I love English paper piecing now. Who would imagine? I used to say, who has all that time to do it? But, I do it. I do it every day. And if I don't do it one day, I feel something is missing from my life. And quilting actually has become a part of my daily life, which brings me joy. And it's some kind of therapy in a good sense and a good addiction. And it's something when you see what you have created makes you feel good and makes others feel good. This is worth all the trouble you have gone into.
I'm now chatting to Margaret in Wyncote near Philadelphia about her incredible 100-day projects, all based on making book covers.
First year that I was retired, I decided I would take part in the 100-day project, which is really just setting a personal goal for yourself and practicing something for 100 days. And I was looking around my house and I was thinking, what can I do that won't be too arduous, but will help me learn something? And I looked at my bookshelves and I thought, books. And some books have just amazing covers. So I thought books, fabric, two things I love. So I thought, well, I'm going to pick a simple block and I'm going to try and match fabric to the book covers. And that will be easy but fun, and I'll have something really nice in the end. So the first book that I did, and I'm just going to hold this up here, was that I thought this is the most beautiful cover. And the reason I picked this one first is that I just saw these two fabrics in my stash. So here they are. And they just, to me, not sure how they do on camera, but in real life, they matched very well. And I was like, I really liked it. I was very pleased. Book covers are complex and they're beautiful works of art. And one thing that I've learned over this process is to appreciate and admire book designers and book artists, because, you know, when they say don't judge a book by its cover, but we often pick up a book because we're attracted to the cover. Sometimes I could sort of match. You know, I just had the fabric. I was amazed actually at fabric. And you know, when you buy a fat quarter bundle, maybe you don't like all of the fabrics in there and you may not use them, but I'll tell you, some of those fabrics came in really handy. I felt I really lucked out on this one because I looked at it and I thought, well, I can make it. I'm pretty sure I can make it. But then I just had this black and white fabric, two different kinds, and just the right shade. And it just worked out really well. Sometimes I could copy a cover pretty exactly because it was sort of geometric in nature. Sometimes there was one element I could focus on. So here's an example of that, where I just sort of picked this element here in this book and kind of enlarged it. So sometimes just one element. Sometimes I could only copy the layout, especially if there were faces of people, and I didn't want to attempt to botch that up. So I would just sort of copy the layout. And other times I just made a new design using the colors, and because that's what drew me to the covers in the first place. It kind of obsesses you a little bit, and people start making book suggestions to you, and you don't look at any book ever the same way again. Even now, I mean, there are books that I see, you know, reviewed in papers and stuff, and I think, oh, that cover, I'd like to make that cover. But so yeah, I think quilting does that to me in general. The kind of you sort of dream about it everywhere you go. You see shapes, you think, you know, there's a drunkard's path. I could make that sort of thing.
And what do you feel when you sit and look at that design wall then?
Well, it's funny. I have, since I made them, I have a newer design wall. And so I never had them all up before. And so it's the thing I think about it when I look at them is they're kind of, it sounds corny, but they're kind of friends, because I've stared at them and stared at the book covers, you know, so much. Like, can I do this? Do I have the fabric? Does this match? So I feel, you know, kind of connected to them. So it's very interesting to see them. And I can kind of remember how I felt when I was making them, whether it was a frustrating one or an easy one, or, you know, just one I really, really liked. You know, my hope for anybody who wants to try something like this is you don't have to wait for any official project. You know, anytime, just set yourself a goal, pick some parameters, be gentle with yourself, because you can change those parameters, you know, anytime. But it's good to have, you know, just certain limitations so that you can, your brain starts focusing. You start noticing things that you may never have noticed before. And what I found is that you have to make mistakes, and you have to practice, and you have to realize this isn't working, and you have to repeat. I think the repetitions are what are helping me figure out what the kind of things I want to make. So that's my advice to myself and to anyone else who's interested is practice, repeat, try new things. And then you figure out what you really like and what you really can do.
This morning, I'm talking to Scott, who is in Berlin with his incredible self-designed quilt Mask #1, which we're going to find out all about now.
When I was working in architecture and as a student, I had a client that she had this project that she was working on, where she was taking the cloth from the clothes of her mother who had passed away, and she was making a quilt out of those. And that symbolism, that idea of taking something that meant so much to her and making it into something that she can actually use and be with every day to remind her of her mother. And it was just so powerful and just struck me so hard. I learned how to do all the piecing. I learned how to do all that, but the imagery just wasn't speaking to me. And so I kind of put quilting off to the side. I was still kind of sewing odds and ends and bags and things like that. And it wasn't until I saw Violet Craft on an episode of Man Sewing, and she introduced her work in paper piecing and kind of how to do it. It's just like, it was like, oh my gosh, this is how I can do something I want to do. So I taught myself I figured out and taught myself how to do the piecing and making the patterns. And then I started creating stuff like this.
And who is this guy then?
So this is a Mexican luchador. He's an actual luchador. His name he went as the Blue Demon. Probably he wrestled in I believe the 50s and 60s. They know what his real name is, but he's never been photographed. Nobody's ever seen his face. He was buried with the mask on, and nobody ever saw what he looked like. The idea of being able to put something on and give yourself some freedom, or maybe cover something up, I find that really interesting. So for one of our anniversaries, my husband and I went to spend some time in Mexico City, and one of the absolutely fun things to do in Mexico City is to go to a lucha libre match. And we went one night, and I absolutely fell in love with the drama, with the spectacle, with just everything that wrapped around the lucha libre. It's a big family event. Kids go, families go, grandmothers go, and they're all yelling for their favorite wrestler. And so when I'm looking for things that I like to quilt and images that I like, this is what it is. I have this need to be creative, and I think if without quilting, the living room walls would be 3 colors by now. And a lot of times for me, I've got this idea in my head, and it's not going to leave my head until I've made it, I've sewn it, I can touch it, I can feel it, and it's the real piece. It's not necessarily something that I've just printed off, but that it's something that I actually put together myself. Quilting in Berlin is an interesting beast. Berlin in itself is a totally crazy art creative city. It's absolutely fantastic. For modern quilters, I've only found a handful.
You need to start a revolution, Scott.
I think so. I would love to.
Very excited to talk to Jess in Sydney, Australia about her 2020 quilt project.
These are our friendly cockatoos who started to visit last year while we were at home, and we started to feed them. So we love these guys. They're cheeky, but if you're not home, they will eat the house. Being in my sewing room and having the radio on, listening to the news, this quilt was my way of documenting the things which we were hearing, and often concepts that had never come up in our whole lifetime. I started using things that I had to hand because we weren't going out to shops. So I started cutting up things like souvenir tea towels, serviettes, because I didn't have that particular colour pink. I worked pieces of embroidery into there that had been given from my mother-in-law's travels. We were in a situation where we had to use what we had, and my practice focuses on that in a lot of ways, but more so in this time when we were stuck at home. I purposely chose a lot of very pretty florals because from a distance it doesn't look as serious as it is when you become closer to the quilt. There are ideas like flu-like symptoms. That's what we were told at the beginning of the pandemic that to look out for. It became known as the blue plague because of the nature of death. You're running out of oxygen, you can't breathe. So these things, they're really heavy, they're really weighty, and airborne sickness. And I really just started to piece ideas and sentences and build them around and around and around the centre panel, which says "gone viral." So I enjoy thinking of play on words as well. So obviously, gone viral. It was in the news all over, and here was this virus. Working on this quilt was something that I could really focus in on and control. It was something that I could do and control when there was so much that we couldn't control. The words become concrete, the words become tangible, they become real. It was a real situation we were living in. It wasn't a movie, it wasn't science fiction. Home sweet home, well, that's tongue-in-cheek, you know. We were going crazy within our four walls, and we're very lucky to live in a comfortable home with a lot of space. But there are other people who are having to homeschool with kids in a unit and all the rest of that. You know, we have a lot to be grateful for, and there's a lot of reflection on that fact in this quilt as well. It felt like work because it was something I returned to each day while the children were busy with their schooling, and it felt like something that I had to do because of the things that were happening around us. It was almost a compulsion to make a tangible record of the things that we were hearing. I like the idea that the work that'll be left after I'm gone is reflective of the time and place it was made in, but not only artful in its meaning, but all my quilts are used as well. You know, they're on the kids' beds. People buy them to use them, and I really like the idea of creating a composition, stitching a canvas, if you like, that is also an object which has a function.
Do you feel like a maker or an artist, or who do you think you are?
I'm a maker. These hands are maker hands, yeah.
Wow, those were some pretty amazing quilts in today's show. Thank you to everybody for taking part. It's mind-blowing how people can create such different objects and evoke such diverse emotional reactions when everybody starts out with the same basic raw materials of fabric and thread. I wonder if, like Scott, you've had one of those eureka moments in your quilt making journey, like when he did the foundation paper piecing and suddenly found that that process would allow him to grow and develop as a maker. If you have, then we would love to know about it. Please comment and let us know about your journey. The Quiltfolk community is growing around the world with these films and the magazine, and it's wonderful to connect with you in lots of different ways. I hope you go off and discover more about the makers that have been featured and connect with them on their own social channels. Please subscribe to the Quiltfolk YouTube channel. There is lots more to come your way, and it is lovely to have you, and I will see you all again very, very soon.